And Donna, your last name again?
Donna Bergstrom.
Bergstrom. And you're running for Lieutenant Governor. Can you tell me your experience in working with homelessness? I know you, from what you said, you have quite a bit.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And the first thing I mentioned was my time in the military when I was stationed in Hawaii, and I was familiar with families that were living on the beach, living in their cars, living in lean-tos against houses because it really was expensive to live there. And the job market wasn't such that there were really good paying jobs. So I think that was my first experience with it. And even though I was in the military, I felt like I was a community member, so I always kept that on my horizon and tried to help out in ways that I could, either through our faith community or through any of the community initiatives that I heard of. And then when I moved back here to Minnesota after I was eligible to retire, I was asked to be on a steering committee for the Center for Changing Lives, which was a Lutheran social service-driven initiative to bring supportive housing and transitional apartments here in one single building to Duluth to serve the northeast region of Minnesota. Their offices would be down below. So for primarily the folks that were living in the housing structure could get the services right in one place, which was a great idea. We were able to successfully partner with public, private, nonprofit, tribal, communities and get the building built. And then after that, we realized we still have youth homelessness here in Duluth. So I was fortunate to be able to volunteer with the Project to Prevent and End Youth Homelessness, kind of a long title. But I've been helping with that effort and really kind of helping define what are some of the ways that we can make homelessness rare and in a very short duration, because we know that on any given night, somebody could become homeless. So the realization to us was that homelessness might not necessarily end because people leave homes under various circumstances, but that we would be able to provide education to where folks could go when they needed resources, and what were some of the services that were available to help them in that short term before they moved on to get permanent housing. So
you mentioned the role of government in this issue. How does your view of the role of government impact what you think? What do you think government's role is?
Well, the state of Minnesota, from our perspective, is to really hold the agencies and departments accountable, and to make sure that the programs that we offer from the state are really working, that the taxpayer dollars, the funding that goes to these programs is well spent, and that programs that are similar can be combined so that we could have more efficiency, and that we really look to our communities to be the incubators for innovative and good ideas. And if a community has a program that's running and we can replicate it across the state, I think that's really where we would be able to serve our Minnesotans well, is to be able to have programs that really are shown to work. But really the role of government is to make sure that the playing field is level, that everybody has equal opportunities and access to housing and employment and things that they need to be productive in our communities. So the accountability, the oversight, and those things I think would include in that.
You mentioned regulations and balancing the need for regulations with the need for housing. Which regulations are you referring to in particular? Or which,
right.
As much as you can?
Yeah, and the one thing that came to mind when this question came up was really, two things that came to mind was the sprinkler issue, and how some of the sprinklers needed to be positioned in a certain way, in certain inches from edges of the ceilings, and we understand that those types of regulations may not make sense in every single house. It might be more cost effective if it was still there, but it was in a different position, or the fire apparatus, how those things are strictly regulated, and those things are for safety. So, that's fine. We understand that there's got to be a balance between keeping people safe and having good regulatory codes in place. The other thing that came to mind is that some of our zoning doesn't allow for in-law suites or such to be built over garages, or if you wanted to add on and you're too close to another house, things like that. What are the barriers that are there? And do they make sense for every community? Is it something that we need to have lifted in certain areas, or is it something that really is a statewide issue and we need to do that for all people? So those are the kinds of things that we would look at is, how can we make regulations either more streamlined, more efficient, and so we know that, housing costs are expensive. If we can make some of those regulatory costs less expensive, housing is going to be less expensive.
Is there anything else that you'd really like to get out to the folks that are watching?
Well, I would say thank you for watching. I sure appreciate this opportunity to talk with folks. I know one of the things we did not talk about was the information highway. We did talk a little bit about roads and bridges, but I think it's important also to think about our information highway and how we're able to connect our communities together with that. Because we certainly know that looking towards the future, we're going to have more people working from home, telecommuting, receiving their medical care through the internet. And so I would add that component to it too. That is something that we need to add into this. But I would also encourage everybody to make sure that they get out and vote. Early voting starts September 21st. And really, if you want to change the culture in St. Paul, Jeff Johnson is the candidate that's interested in doing that and making sure that government is working for you. So thank you.
Thank you. Best to you.
Thank you.
Liz, we're live on the UpTake. Would you like to talk about it? Okay, go ahead.
I don't walk up and I think we're starting. See how to find my hotel.
Hi.
Who are you?
Kristen Larson.
Good to
here
see you.
with the UpTake
Absolutely.
today. Peggy, when you talk about homelessness, it's very personal, obviously. You talk about getting different kinds of assistance. Were you ever actually homeless as a child?
I was never actually homeless as a child, but we did stay with family members from time to time. But I think the bottom line is that there were work support programs that were available to my family when we needed help, and those programs helped to lift my family out of poverty. And now I get to pay that back and pay that forward through public service, through nonprofit work. And I think that, my story is a Minnesota story when we wrap our arms around people when they need help, and know that the entire state benefits when folks have what they need.
And in such a cold climate, and it can be so harsh. This is not a small thing. What's going to happen with the people that are in the tent camps that as the cold weather approaches?
So that's a really important question. What's going to happen with the people at the Hiawatha encampment? There's been a pretty incredible response, both from the Department of Transportation, the City of Minneapolis, Mayor Fry, and the community. It's the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors, Natives Against Heroin. When I was there yesterday, I was really struck by how much folks are taking care of each other. And I think that's what people need to know, that this is a community. And so any next steps that are taken need to be taken with the community. I think there will be a temporary solution through the winter, and ultimately I think the goal is to make sure that everyone is stably housed. So Tim and I will do what we can to be helpful and supportive there. And yesterday I was there to just listen and to learn and to be in community with folks. And I think it was really important for me to spend that time and I think that as we look at this issue, one of the things that really struck me is, there are tents that go all the way around on Hiawatha Avenue, and when you're at the end of the tent line, you see U.S. Bank Stadium in the distance, and so it was a really stark contrast about our priorities, and I think we just need to do a better job of making sure that every Minnesotan can thrive and has what they need to be successful, and that these jurisdictions are talking to one another. And it's clear to me that the nonprofit community, the city, the state, and the community in general are all coming together to try to move forward. And my hope is that the work that is done here doesn't just disappear after people are housed, but there's some type of lasting effect of collaboration moving forward.
One of the things here in northern Minnesota, and I'm from about 40 miles north of here, we have two kind of conflicting problems. We have a lack of internet and a declining population, and the threat of copper nickel mining, and we're really concerned about that. Is there anything you can share with me about how you'll approach the threat of sulfide mining in northeastern Minnesota, especially in terms of protecting the Lake Superior watershed, where so many people are impacted now and in the future by that potential pollution?
Sure. So you talked about a couple things, right? You talked about lack of internet,
yep.
And you talked about folks who are leaving and moving away. And one of the things that I think that we hear a lot from folks on the other side of the aisle is access to broadband, with not a lot of actual resources behind that. So that's something that's really important for us and for infrastructure.
I have friends who are trying to run businesses on dial-up, essentially.
Absolutely.
Frontier dial-up.
For sure. Which is a challenge. Or I talk to students who have to go to the local Perkins to do their homework because they can't access the internet at home. So, real investment in broadband is critical to the infrastructure, the future of their state, and making sure that people can live where they want to live. When it comes to the issue of mining, I think that it is really key that we follow a process. We look at the environmental, requirements, and if we go through this process that we can't do it safely, then we shouldn't do it. But we need to follow the process, and any kind of weakening of that process is something that Tim and I thoroughly reject.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. Thank you.
Mike, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you. So I think I will do so right now, okay?